Time signatures can be really confusing, and there's more to the time signature than simply how many notes can fit into a measure. If the time signature only told us how many notes could fit into a measure, then these time signatures would all be identical. But time signatures do more than tell us how many notes can fit into a measure. They're also responsible for assigning the number of beats in your music. So if you assumed that the time signature 2/4 was basically the same as 4/4, but just cut in half, then that would be a very wrong assumption. And I'm going to tell you why at the end of this video. So today, I'll be showing you examples of how the beats of these time signatures rhythmically influences music. But first, we need to talk about the role of beaming in music. And the best way to show you why beaming is so important is through this simple demonstration of 4/4 time. So 4/4 time means that we have 4 quarter notes in a measure, and each quarter note gets 1 beat. So each measure has 4 beats in total. We can therefore section off this measure into 4 parts. As our note durations decrease, we start to beam them to fill up the beats in the measure. So what this simple demonstration is showing us is that beams represent beats. However, sometimes composers can break the beaming rules and beam any way they wish, especially if they want to change the beat structure of a time signature. So composers can complicate things and beam notes across measures, and this is one of many reasons why time signatures are so confusing. The most common types of time signatures are your simple and compound time signatures. And guess what? The numerator has 2 functions, which can lead to even more confusion. The most obvious function of the numerator is that it tells us how many notes of a certain duration can fit into a measure. But the less obvious function is that it also helps us calculate the number of beats in a measure as well. In simple time signatures, the numerator will be divisible by 2, but not by 3. And the numerator will also equal the number of beats in a measure. But things change when we get to compound time signatures. So by definition, a compound time signature is where the numerator is greater than 3, but it's also divisible by 3. So if this is the case, then we group notes by 3. However, this is where things can get a little bit confusing because each group in a compound time signature is considered a beat. So let's just say we're in 6/8 time. While it's true that we have 6 beats in this measure, we also have 2 prominent beats because of this compound time signature rule. So if we are in the time signature of, let's say, 12/8, since 12 is divisible by 3, it's a compound time signature. And by definition, we group these 8th notes by 3s. Because we have 4 groups of 8th notes, we have 4 prominent beats, not 12. But let's say we have 4/8 time. 4 is divisible by 2 and not by 3, so this is considered simple time. And because of this, the numerator is the number of prominent beats in this measure, which would be 4. So you might be wondering why I'm educating people on how beats affect how music should be performed. And the reason for this is because I'm creating a music notation software called Music Jotter. And at this point, I'm working on playback. Beaming rules and time signatures will affect how your music is played back in Music Jotter. And this will actually make your music sound much more realistic. So if you are excited about this development, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And if you're interested in early access to Music Jotter, you can also join my Buy Me a Coffee community for just $2 or $3 a month. So then what is the significance of a beat? Like, why do we even care? Well, it all has to do with how we perform the music. If a note lands on a beat, then this note is accented or emphasized. And the notes in between these accents will be played with less emphasis. And this is exactly why the time signature 3/4 is different from 6/8. Since 3/4 is in simple time, we have 3 beats. And 6/8 will group 3 notes into 2 beats. because it's in compound time. We can clearly hear the emphasis of the three groups of twos in 3/4 time versus the two groups of threes in 6/8 time. So now let's take a look at 4/4 time. Since we're in simple time, we have 4 beats in this measure. So this means that each quarter note is then accented. But let's say we have all eighth notes. Then every other eighth note in this measure will be accented instead. So what's the difference between the time signature 4/4 and 8/8? They both can fit the same exact number of notes in a measure, so why even use 8/8? We know that the numerator 8 is divisible by 2 and not by 3, so we're in simple time. And since we're in simple time, we have 8 beats. The denominator tells us that each beat is assigned to an eighth note. So we have 8 prominent beats in the time signature 8/8, whereas in 4/4 time, we only have 4 prominent beats. Now I have some ear training exercises for you, and we're going to critically listen to how time signatures affect or influence how music is performed. So let's start with Peter's rendition of Harvest Moon, which is music from a Nintendo game. You'll notice that we have some pretty nice rhythms in 4/4 time, and you can clearly hear where the accents are meant to be as you will follow along with my metronome. We also have some time signature changes, and I want you to pay close attention to these parts, which are in 3/4 and 7/8 time. My next example is an Elegie by Johan, and in this Elegie, let's take a look at how Johan groups these eighth notes by twos. You can clearly hear the beats of this music being emphasized every 2 notes. But if we skip ahead to this section right here, the eighth notes are now grouped into 4s. And even though we have 4 beats to these measures, there's more emphasis to beats 1 and 3. And beats 2 and 4 are what we call weaker beats. And beat 1 and 3 are much more pronounced. This beautiful classical style string quartet is composed by Lewis, and he takes advantage of the common time to emphasize 4 beats in these measures. And as a reminder, each quarter note is emphasized. The first beat of every measure is also the strongest. And here's a diagram showing this. Next, we have a rock song by Alid called Apocalypse, and I have no information on what the time signature is, but if I were to guess, we're in simple time 4/4. And the drums really help us along with this beat. We can clearly hear the emphasis of 1, 2, 1, 2. And at this point you may be asking me, why isn't this in 2/4 if we have the 1-2-1-2 beat? And after closely listening to this piece, it seems like every 4 or 8 beats, the harmony changes. And here's an example of that.
Little did you know that it wasn't gonna do it. They've broken up the planet, now you want to glue it. You don't know what you're doing. Blinded by your greed. As I'm gazing at the sky, I can see it's full of fire. My last day on earth, end of humankind, as the end starts to rise.
These harmonic changes every 4 or 8 beats indicate that we're in simple quadruple time, and in this case, we're most likely in 4/4. Here's a really awesome piano piece called After Rain by Elias that takes advantage of the time signatures 7/4 and 8/4. 7/4 is actually considered a complex time signature, and the quarter notes can be grouped into 3 groups. So I'm going to try my best to count the beats for you so that you have an understanding of how the beats in these time signatures affect a performance. And finally, we have this fun waltz piece called Evergreen Waltz, composed by Soroosh. And I don't have the sheet music for this music either, but we don't need it because we can easily figure out that we are in 3/4 time. Because first, it sounds like that we have 3 beats to a measure. And another dead giveaway is this. Notice how the harmonies may change at the beginning of each strong beat. As promised earlier, let's talk about how 2/4 is in fact different from 4/4 and not simply just the same time signature divided in half. By definition, the first beat of each measure is always the strongest beat. So if we take a look at 4/4 time, we have 4 beats, right? So our strongest beat is on beat 1 and our second strongest beat would be on beat 3. But in 2/4 time, we have 2 beats in a measure, a strong beat followed by a weaker beat. If we go to the second measure, we have another strong beat followed by a weaker beat. So the difference in time signatures become much more apparent because in 4/4 time we have a strong beat followed by weaker beats, but in 2 measures in 2/4 time we have a strong beat, a weak beat, a strong beat, and a weak beat. And this is why the time signature of 2/4 gives us more of a march-like feel to it, and it's more of a common time signature to use for ragtime music, such as in The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. So if you want to see a fun little short I created outlining the differences between 3/4 and 6/8, make sure you click here next. See you next time.